Okay, folks, hello. This is welcome to the Will to Win podcast. I'm your host, Will Cook, and today I have a very special guest. His name is Mark Pattison, and this gentleman has done a lot of really terrific things in his life. And right here, I have his book. It's called Finding Your Summit: How to Build Resilience and Faith to Rise Above Life's Challenges. So, Mark has had an NFL career. He's had a mountaineering career. He's won an Emmy. Um, and also he was an exec at Sports Illustrated. So, Mark, there's a lot of things that we're going to dive into today, but I wanted to know from you, how did you know that you were going to kind of get into something really special with your life? Was there a time when you were younger where you just knew you had determination, knew you had grit? When did that awaken for you or become available to you?
Yeah, I think there's a couple points in there, and thanks for having me on your show, by the way. I really appreciate that. This is gonna be a great conversation. I don't think there's one moment that you just wake up and all of a sudden this thing comes into you like you're a superstar or something like that. I think that's built over time, and I think for me, I just have the love of sports. Different people are attracted to different things. Maybe it might be drama, might be somebody might be really gifted in math. I always just happen to be gifted in sports. Anything with the ball in my hand and being out in the play field was kind of my thing. And I didn't really drift into, I never did, drugs, and I just wasn't that did not click into me. And where a lot of guys are trying to really find themselves during, those formative years in high school. But I think it was really once I went to the University of Washington, which is really the realization that once you get there, and you probably saw it in this book that I just recently wrote, which is it was the moment of truth which is the light bulb going off about talent only takes you so far, and if you want to nurture or nature, however you say that, your talent to maximize then this thing called potential. Because potential, as once explained to me by a coach, is only something when people talk about, boy, that kid sure has a lot of potential. It means people think this person has a high ceiling. And so for me to reach that ceiling, I had to put in work that I didn't even know how to even do that work because I'd never done it because I never had to do it. And so it really came from that leadership from that coach, Don James, and his assistants to really drive me to a whole different level, a level that I never realized. And I think that, answering your question, was the springboard that really drove me forward.
Okay. Were there any particular challenge you had? You played for the Washington Huskies, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Were there any challenges in your college career where you thought about quitting, or you just thought it was too hard, or there was something that happened where you were like you got into a funk and you just didn't know if you were going to climb out?
Yeah, the answer is yeah, 100%. It was in those early years because, I mean, for some other people, I don't know who this is, but there's other people out there like me, which is when you're used to being the star. And in Washington, I was a state. I'm only saying this for context of your question. I was a state player of the year my junior year as a receiver, and I was a state player of the year in the state of Washington my senior year as a quarterback, two completely different positions,
Wow.
right? And so you go from all that kind of limelight and things coming easy, and you just walk out the door. And I never lifted a weight or did any of that stuff, to I'm on the bench. I don't even know if I'm going to play. Every single scholarship guy they're bringing in was the all-state guy from that state in that position. Obviously there's different, there's linemen, there's defensive backs and things like that. But, everybody's good. And when you build a really strong program like you see now at even Washington a little bit, and the NIL's shifted things a little bit, but Ohio State and Michigan and the perennial favorites that are out there, Alabama, LSU, you've usually got three or four deep in the depth chart of really talented guys, right? And so it no longer, and everybody's talented. Everybody runs fast, everybody catches the ball, everybody can throw, catch, run, all those things. And so the question is, what's your point of difference going to be? What are you going to be able to excel at? And typically, when they go and they recruit, they know that in that recruiting, when you layered it up over 4 or 5 years of guys on your team, there's going to be your stars, there's going to be your backups, and there's going to be your guys that bust out. They break their leg, they do drugs, they flunk out of school, something like that. And so it's kind of like if there's 30, there's 10, 10, 10. And that's just usually the formula that it works. So the question is, how can you jump into the elite 10 that are going to be up there? And so those dark days, back to your question, uh, you know, it took me years to get on the field, not only for my own development, but guys that were already in front of me that I had to just wait my turn. And even though you have to wait your turn, you don't know when that moment of truth is going to happen for you. And for me, I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. After I practiced a million times over all these different things, we're playing Michigan and turned out to be the last second of the game. I caught a touchdown in the end zone, and that really set things forward. But I'd also done that play a million times, and there was a lot of moments that I wanted to quit as I was leading up to that because, you just can't see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Okay. So Mark, was there conversations you had with a coach or with family? Like what was happening when you felt discouraged? Was there something that just you did that caused it to click, or somebody said, hang in there? What was the dialogue, or was there an internal dialogue and a combination of external dialogue? What happened there?
Yeah, so this was a crazy time. I've never really talked about this either. So, um, there was a moment in time I was living in my fraternity. This was like my first year. I think it was my first year, and I was a full-blown rock star in the frat, going to all the things, staying up late, and I was suffering in school and I was suffering on the football field.
Yeah.
And so this just moment in time just hit me, and I sat in a room for like 8 hours by myself, locked the door. And I just, I cried and I tried to figure things out and where am I going? And it ultimately just was really clear. It's either you're going to choose, and this is for all of us in life, you can either take door one or you can go through door two. And
Yes.
door two was the path of least resistance, which was to quit, which meant I would have had to, my scholarship would have gone away. I'm going to be a frat guy. And it was that moment, I'm not sure what it was. It was like, you know what, I'm not going to quit. And then, and I did some definitive things in that moment. One, I moved out of the frat. I moved home. My parents lived, I grew up in Seattle. So that was a big thing. So to take me out of that environment. Two, completely rededicated myself to school so I could stay eligible and I actually learn something. And number three, go balls out in terms of the program, the pyramid of success that they had outlined for me that if you're ever going to have a chance to win and play in this program, that you need to like get on board with this program. And so I just literally redefined my whole body. I couldn't even bench my weight, which was 181 pounds. And I left there at the end of the day, like benching over 350, which is a lot of weight, especially for me. And I just became strong physical machine. And with that came the confidence that in time I could now take on USC, UCLA, Stanford, LSU, Oklahoma, those guys, and know like I'm going to beat your ass. Before when I first came to the UW, I was like scared pigeon man because all those guys were bigger, faster, stronger, and more confident, and I just didn't have that thing at that time. So really having that one moment that day that I spent 8 hours in a room, just feeling sorry for myself and emerging out of there with action items on what I was going to do. And that was really the moment of truth for me that transformed everything.
Wow, you can feel the passion in what you're saying. And I've worked with a lot of people that have performed at a high level, and nobody's exempt from these challenges. I mean, when you talk about guys like Derek Jeter had 58 errors in the minor leagues in one season. And you talk to his parents, he's like, I'm going to quit. And their parents are like, you're not quitting. And the Yankees are like, you're not quitting. And there's something that they see in their development, but they have to go through the adversarial experiences to grow. But also, true confidence comes from the work ethic, from the work that you've done.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people have this confidence, but they don't have any type of structure to support that. So one is you had a breakthrough moment where it's like, this is a must, this is what I have to do. And then you got to a point where I have to do it and have to do it consistently. And then, like you said, with the catch, you had done so many repetitions, that was like automatic pilot. But a lot of people don't realize that this effortless effort comes from tremendous work. So,
Let me add one more thing onto it because
sure,
this is super juicy on top of what you just said, what I said,
beautiful.
which is this is that there is nobody out there. Now, I'm not saying there's not with the same amount, but there's nobody out there with the relentless daily determination and relentlessness that I have in terms of once I made that decision, you gotta go. Like a lot of times people make a decision, like this is your classic New Year's resolution that in November, December, I want to lose weight, I want to do this, I want to do that. You make it, and by March they're back out of it. And just like even today. I'm out every single morning at exactly 6 a.m. I'm up at 5:30, out the door at 6 a.m., and I'm doing my thing like I did this morning at 5:30 in the morning, or waking up and then out the door for an hour and a half. And this has led so many times to the same repetition. And now I'm not training for a mountain right now. I just got back from climbing in Montenegro, but the whether it's my work, which as you mentioned before, I ran a big part of Sports Illustrated for the last 10 years, or something athletic like mountaineering or in the NFL or playing major college football or winning an Emmy, like this same pattern with the same drive and the same goal setting has just led to rewards over and over and over again. And the beauty about this is that they've all been different verticals. It hasn't been the same thing. Like I'm a painter, so I just keep painting. It's been, the NFL is completely different from climbing Mount Everest. Mount Everest is completely different from running Sports Illustrated. Sports Illustrated is completely different from making a film.
Right.
The Making the film is completely different for the most part from writing this book that you just talked about, Finding Your Someone, which debuted at #1 on Amazon. Like it's just time and time and time and time, and I'm not that special, but I think that is it. And for anybody that's listening on the will to win, that is the separator with so many people
Okay.
that I just don't quit and I keep going and I'm disciplined, which means
Mhm.
I don't stay out late and I don't drink my ass off. And when it's super fun and all that kind of stuff, I cut it and I go home and I shut it down. So because I prioritize my mornings more than my nights, that I can get up and I can accomplish what I need to for the ultimate goal that's down here. So then everybody goes, "Oh my God, well, how'd you do it?" Well, I know how I did it, and there's no cameras and there's no riders and there's nobody like documenting what I'm doing, and I don't need that. But that is the difference, is that people just take that same kind of effort that they can achieve amazing things in their life too.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you for that. So let's level up for a second
Yeah.
in terms of your own progression. So you talk about the Huskies, and then boom, you're moving on your way to the NFL. And I
Yeah.
think it was the seventh round, I believe.
Yeah.
So now take us through that because there are no guarantees there, right? And seventh round is not the first round. It sounds like you're in Tom Brady territory where you're like, is this going to happen? So talk to us about that. Talk, what was it like, and when did you know you were going and you were going to make it?
Yeah, well, look, I knew I was going to make it from the moment I walked in there. Again, mindset is so much of this too, right? Where we talked about hard work and
Right.
consistency and being relentless, but also what goes between your ears is a big part of this too. And when I
Yes.
first got down there, like I was looking around and there's a whole bunch of superstars, Howie Long and Marcus Allen and Jim Plunkett, and guys had won the Heisman Trophy, and they'd been in the Super Bowl 2 years before, and much of that same team was still on there. There's this, how is this going to happen? Especially not only is a seventh round draft pick, but there were two other receivers. One guy, Tim Moffitt, in the third round, and Jesse Hester in the first round,
Okay.
wide receivers that had also been drafted. So it was almost an impossibility. And I don't even know why to this day that they drafted me in the seventh round, but I just put that in my mind that one way or the other, I was going to make that team. And things come in different flavors, and it's maybe not always exactly how you would have drawn it up, but at the end of the day, I played 5 years. I got my pension. I hit my ceiling on what that could be. I wish I would have played 10. There are probably some things in there that could have lent towards that. But at the end of the day, that was my destiny. But but being there and then being cut and then being traded and then being brought back and being, I mean, I went through the whole thing, and it is hard, and it's hard mentally because you're trying to, just when you think you got it, you're gone. And yeah. So, and that's just the NFL, that's pro sports, and all that stuff. And so it's just like, that's why you got to make sure that you have your eye kind of on like what's next and what's next, and don't 100% tie your whole identity around just being a football player, which a lot of guys do.
Okay. So that we're going to talk about that identity shift in a second, but I was looking at at your stats and stuff, and I noticed I think 87 with the Saints is when you had I believe it was like 9 receptions for 132 yards.
Yeah.
So if I've got that correctly, but that's over 10 yards a catch. And so you were starting to like, you know, that's not an easy feat. And I was wondering like, so then what happened there? Because I mean that those are decent stats. So what went on there with the Saints?
Well, the Saints was actually a great experience, and I was there for a couple of years, and then my third year we were going into it, and everything back then I was really brought in to be that when the four receivers come out and that's third down and you're just trying to get that first down. So, and I was the guy going underneath and catching the ball and getting blasted. So that was my role, and playing special teams, and that last year was the first year of what now is become like much more developed free agency. I mean, they have true free agency, but back then was their first kind of jump into the water where each team could expose 20 players or something. And so there's this thing called Plan B. And so in the Plan B thing, I got double the amount of money to go to the Seattle Seahawks. And so, I had a big bonus and it seemed great on paper. And that's where I should never have left because I had a lot of security in what I had with New Orleans in terms of as secure as you can be in the NFL. And Seattle turned out not to be a good fit for me. And anyways, those things happen and it is what it is. But I was well liked. We had a really good team back, and it was actually the first year I got there in 1987 was the most amount of wins that the Saints have ever had and had first winning season. So it was amazing to be a part of not only just winning because I'd always won, but part of something in a city where we just saw the Knicks and how the entire city of New York has gone cuckoo, right?
Yeah, totally.
Around, right, these watch parties. Well,
Yeah.
that was going on back
Yeah.
in New Orleans because they'd never won before. They're just dying for a winner. And they finally had one. And so that was a lot of fun.
Oh, that's really awesome. So, in terms of capping your career, and I'm going to ask this question a certain way, and you'll understand why.
Hmm.
When I talked to Mitch Gaylord, he won a gold medal in the '84 Olympics,
Yeah.
and he also won a silver and 2 bronze. So I said to him, just making the Olympics is incredible. It's
Yeah.
amazing to win any kind of medal, but as a peak performer who's a level up person, I said to him, did you have any disappointment with the fact that in those individual events that you won a silver and 2 bronze and not the gold?
Yeah.
And so he appreciated the way I asked the question because I was honoring the
Yeah.
achievement. But as a peak performer, you're always going to have that question. So for you, having made it into the NFL, which is the peak for football,
Hmm.
is there disappointment at all? Do you kind of recycle things in your mind and you wish you had done them differently or better? When you look at your career, what happens? How does that memory show up?
Well, that's a good question. I've had this happen to me actually, I think three different times. Um, One is in the NFL that if I hadn't left the Saints, but again, there's lots of guys who are in my situation where something on paper, like a lesson learned out of this whole thing is like really um, go for the love of the game, not necessarily for what the monetary value is. And so even though the Seahawks were paying me double, right, I had a great situation and I would have more than made that up because of the longevity. I would probably have at least another 3, 4 years down in New Orleans, right?
Oh,
Just the trajectory of the way that was going.
so yeah.
And yeah, it was great. It was a great scenario for me.
Mhm.
And so I had an opportunity to go back home. So that I can't take that back. That's a woulda, coulda, shoulda, and you just learn from those things.
Okay.
Number two, and you haven't asked me about this yet, but we'll go into it. When I went to climb Mount Everest, I'd actually put my sights on climbing not only Mount Everest, but also come down at Camp 4 at 26.5 and then go up back on Lhotse. And I wasn't able to accomplish that. And that took me a while to get over, kind of like that the example that you just were talking about. And when I came back, I was talking to my my good friend Hugh Millen, who played in the NFL for 10 years. We were college teammates and high school teammates too. And I go, God, I'm just really struggling with this. I'm really struggling. He goes, look at idiot. This is like, Michael Phelps winning 20 gold medals. And then he gets like, just because they asked him to, he goes off and he wins a silver in the relay or a bronze in the relay. Like, who cares? Lhotse is the fourth highest mountain in the world. You got the prize. That's all that matters. So it took me a little while. And for when I was nominated for my Emmy Award, I ended up winning Best Picture. It was great, but I was also nominated for best cinematography. I didn't win it, and I was so appreciative though of those so many of these major network stars that you and I both have seen on TV 1,000 times, and they get up like, oh my God, I've been nominated 6 times, and now I finally won the award, and here it is, and thank you, and all that kind of stuff. And here I come the first time. So I guess what I'm trying to say is really trying to appreciate the moment at hand of what you've been able to accomplish
Right.
and the other consequences, whatever come out of those other things, sometimes are just lessons that in our lives we need to learn about how to take not only success, I wouldn't call it failure necessarily, but other things that maybe somebody else might see as a disappointment, or maybe it didn't work out in its fullest potential, way.
Exactly. And sometimes there's things outside of our control. And I have a saying that luck is the intersection between opportunity and preparation. So
Yeah.
you're going to create your own luck too. You,
Yeah.
you might be more lucky than somebody else, in terms of that. And I think that, and when we talk about motivation, motivation's a fleeting thing, but discipline is the thing that you keep doing until it becomes a habit. And then it's something that becomes a part of you. And you're going to have that luck. And people say, well, you're very fortunate. It's like, well, you don't see all the work. So let me take that into the next context.
Whoa,
So,
whoa, 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 wait, before you go there, because I
okay.
just want to illustrate that point, because
Okay, good.
you said
Thank
it
you.
so, no, you said it so well, which is that is because I want to go back to the first question you asked me, right? Kind of about where that preparation meets opportunity, like the mindset of where it really clicked in. And so I'm grinding, 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 grinding,
Right.
grinding. And now I get my first chance to start. I'm a junior. We're playing Michigan. We're down by 2 touchdowns going into the fourth quarter. We come back, we score. Now we're down by 7. They get the ball. They drive down the field. They line up for a field goal. They miss it. The guy shanks it right. So now with 2 minutes to go, we have the ball at about the 25-yard line. So we have to go 75 yards for a touchdown to tie it, right? And back in those days, didn't have the whole overtime that they have now. So you could go for two and versus kicking the field goal. And so, anyways, we drive all the way down the field. And so this is where luck and preparation and opportunity, I was saying, like collided all at one time, which is we're down with 8 seconds to go on the 10-yard line, and my quarterback calls an audible, and he has the opportunity to either throw it left or right, in terms of a fade around the end zone. And he happened to go my way, and I happen to, so here comes the ball. I fade in the end zone, jump over the top of the guy, catch the ball, and I end up on Sports Illustrated, a huge, gigantic spread of, sometimes something like, dreams do come true or something. But again, that when they asked me after the game about that play, I said, I've done that 1,000 times in my head, right? That's the thing that you were talking about,
Yeah.
where that consistency of the work of
Yep.
going over and over and over. And then who could have called that moment? And so that's where the luck comes in, right? Meeting the preparation, meeting the opportunity, which then I converted, and then my career took off from there.
Wow. Okay. So thanks for illustrating that. That's amazing. And it it really does hit home for people that when you realize is that you don't even have to be a genius, you don't have to be a special, you don't have special necessarily even special abilities, but if you're somebody who's willing to grind and have that grit, which is the passion and the perseverance, you can achieve a lot of stuff. And so I want to take it to the next level
Yeah,
because so the NFL is that's like I said, you don't go higher than that in football.
no,
But then your career's over and you're still really young.
yeah.
And retirement in sports is younger than retirement age. So what happened when you realize it's over? What was that period in between like? And I imagine you suffered a bit or were challenged a bit. So what did you do with that? How did you figure out what the next step was?
Well, it did take me a couple of years, and so I would love to tell you, like, because my story from the outside sounds pretty shiny, especially running Sports Illustrated last 10 years, and I blew it up to this like a machine, and then I've started two venture-backed companies and things like that. But the NFL today has a great program called the Trust, and it came out of so many players like me that when you were done, you went off the cliff. So here I am from 8 years old, 7 years old, all the way to 29 of really playing. I mean, obviously there's high school and there's college, but I was a football guy. And and so that takes me all the way till I'm 29 years old. Now, got to remember too, not only was my identity caught up in playing football and everybody knew me from that, and there's all the fame and the endorsement deals and all that kind of stuff that go with it. But my buddies who had gone to college now had gone and they were in their first or second, third, they kind of zigzag. Now they're kind of like, okay, they've leveled up and after the third job, they know where they're going and they're kind of on their way and now they're making X. So I go from making, zero to six figures back down to zero. And now they're somewhere in between there, well on their way towards their path. And what I recognized after nobody called me back, and I thought that everybody would call me back because I was a nice guy, that I offered nothing to these companies. So what the trust has done now today is they've got Merrill Lynch, shadow that you can go learn about financial services. You can go become a coach. You can become a broadcaster.
Right.
So there's all these different programs and career counselors that you can call on to along with all this medical stuff that the NFL has developed for these players to help them kind of manage their way because there's so much mental health tied around to your identity on who you are. And when you lose that, then where do you sit? So for me, I didn't have any of that like a lot of guys. And I had driven off the cliff, and now like I'm going through my head of like woulda, coulda, shoulda, I should never have left the Saints and what, you know, but that didn't happen, right? And so 2 years I just sat and just tried to figure it out. And I was so frustrated because I knew I was destined for something great and I just could not figure it out. And I couldn't figure it out because I'd kind of go down this road, but then I'd stop. And, I just didn't have this. I learned something about that, about action creates reaction and you got to move. And even though it might not be the thing that you end up in, at least I hate that. I never want to do that. And so I had to learn those hard lessons. And, like I said, it did take me about 2 years to figure it out. And once I did, I could take that same energy and rechannel it and just, put it all there and then go. And I was good once I hit go and I have a goal and I have a focus. But it was just trying to figure out what the target was, up until that point.
Mhm.
And so it was very frustrating.
So, okay. So you ended up doing the seven highest summits on each continent,
Hmm.
and
Well,
which
so hold on. That was like 20 years after that. So I just want to make sure we're clear on that. So I went into a work life and then I got married, then I had kids, and I'm doing all those things,
okay, thank you for the
right?
clarification. Yep,
Yeah, because a lot of people, they think, oh, it's climbing, and so then what? Let's go climb mountains, right? So
right.
it wasn't really towards that period till probably 20 years later,
Okay.
right? I was 50, not 30, and now I'd had a career and now I was well on my way. But now I've run into another mega wedge in my life. And I was going through a divorce, but there's a lot of people that go through relationship, hardships, and so I'm not the only
Sure.
one with that. Or my dad happened to die at the same time of a massive stroke, and so it was just a tough thing for me to do. So it was really after I'd had that work career and I'd kind of redefined, and now I was financially stable and I knew what I was doing and all this kind of stuff. But now I'm going through another hardship over here,
Right.
like how do I deal with that, right? Just kind of going back to that first question you asked me like when I'm not playing, I'm the star now, I'm not, and like what's the future? How I'm going to deal with that, right? I moved in with my parents. I didn't move back with my parents, but you know what I mean? It's just like it's a complete mindset shift that you need to retrench because life happens and there's life changes. And so how are you going to adapt and how are you going to go forward?
Okay. I want to bring in a person, a coach,
Mhm.
and because he was not just a part of your life and your football career, but he's part of your life well into your where you are now. Tell me a little bit about your relationship with Jim Mora. I think he helped you train for the higher summits as well.
Yeah, well, look, Jim and I, so not only did I play for his dad, Jim Moore Sr., who was the head coach at New Orleans Saints and Indianapolis Colts, was super successful coach. His birthday was a week ago, 91. I texted him, so we're still in that kind of relationship. But his son, Jim Moore Jr., has also been an NFL coach with the Atlanta Falcons and the Seattle Seahawks. He's currently the head coach of Colorado State, turned around UConn the last 4 years, and before that was the head coach at UCLA. So he's had a great run. Now we came in and met each other when we were freshmen at the University of Washington. So Jim and I go way, 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 way back.
Wow. Okay.
And so we've got a lot of history. And this is all before, like again, Jim was standing there when we were nothing, right? When we weren't playing and we were on great teams, but both of us had to work our way into that. So Jim has seen my entire arc and I've seen his entire career not only blow up, but also blow up, right? Both ways. And he's seen mine too. So we unfortunately we both went through divorces about the same time. And so we've been really there to support each other. I had moved to Sun Valley, Idaho, and shortly after I'd moved here, he decided to move here as well. And
Wow.
so he spends when he's not obviously coaching on the East Coast or now Fort Collins in Colorado. Jim is here. He'll be here in a few days, and we just train. We both have a extreme love of the mountains. He doesn't do extreme stuff like I do, but just getting up and getting high and get elevation and get those legs worked out. We just both love that workout and that drive, and we've just got a boatload of things in common. And so for that reason, we've been very tight over all these years.
Okay. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Um, so hiking and mountaineering, obviously there's a difference, right? There's plenty of summits. I'm right here in New York. We have the Adirondack Mountains. We have a hike in the Whites. I'm an avid hiker, but I've never done a summit like an Everest or
Yeah.
where there's, either oxygen required or a mountaineering gear and things like that, ropes and belay and all that stuff. So, what was the first mountain that you did where you were like, you're putting to test now these new skills that you've learned?
Yeah, I think it was there's been a gradual, so going all the way back to 1998, is I grew up in the great state of Washington and we have a big ass mountain up there called Mount Rainier.
Yep.
There's a lot of people that come from around the country to go climb Mount Rainier. It's small in terms of the height is 14,500 feet, so there's a 10,000 foot gain, but it's got a lot of things that you're going to see on a big ass mountain like Mount Everest and some of these other ones around the world. But that was really my first test. And, I did it and I loved it, with crampons and ice axe and you're on ropes and all that kind of stuff. We had awful weather and I still loved it. And then I had done Mount Whitney a couple times down in California, which is actually the highest mountain in the lower 48, the second highest mountain next to Denali up in Alaska, which I've done a couple times. I've done Whitney a couple times.
Okay.
And so it's just when I think there's multiple levels of mountaineering, high level mountaineering. So, can your body even withstand the altitude? There's a lot of people that their composition is such that they just can't handle going up that high and their body just falls apart. And this has happened to a number of my different friends, and it can be very, very, very serious. And so you got to make sure that you get down, not only that, but maybe mountaineering isn't the best thing for that particular person. So I kind of passed and crossed that off. But where I really dove into this was 2013 when once I decided to commit and really like lean into this. And a lot of this is because I think for so many of this, and so this goes back to part of the will to win concept is this where your focus goes, your energy usually follows, right? So if I'm sad and I'm bummed and my dad died and I'm divorced, you're like that can bring you down pretty quickly. And so my energy, your shoulders go down and what am I going to do about this?
Right.
And when I set that BHAG, that big, hairy, audacious goal, that was so far out of the stratosphere for me. Like, how do you even climb like Mount Everest, and how do you even get to Africa? And you're in the jungle with monkeys and giraffes, and like, how does that all work? And so it really gave my spirits a big ass lift to not only have to research it, but then get on a plane and go attack it, right? And I just kept saying to myself, the whole thing is pretty expensive, and I just like, you know what? Somehow or another, this is just what I need to do,
Right.
and I will figure it out later. And I just know that blue skies ahead, even though I have no idea what the blue sky was going to look like, right? And so that's what I did. I took off for Africa and Kilimanjaro. I actually have done that twice as well. And and so that was the first of really this trajectory of learning how to mountain climb, because every one of not just the seven, but the Matterhorn and the Eiger and Mount Blanc and Cotopaxi and the Grand Teton and all these other mountains I've done, each one requires something slightly different. So that's the fun thing about mountaineering.
Okay. So here we go, because now we're going to get into the charge of all this, and we're going to get
Yeah.
into what probably people are waiting for in terms of Mount Everest.
Yeah.
But there's so many different things that went on there, and so many inspirations, and there's amazing inspirations. I know you could draw a lot of inspiration from your daughters, and Amelia with her challenge with, I believe it's epilepsy, correct?
Yeah.
Um, and but there's also the issue with Aaron Washington, I believe, a friend of yours that also had passed on Everest.
Don Cash.
Okay, who was Aaron? Who was Aaron? How did I confuse that?
I don't know, but it doesn't matter. It's yeah, Don Cash is a guy that I had tent mated with in Antarctica, and we were down there for 3 weeks, and he was a good guy, but he just wasn't a good mountaineer. And what I mean by that is that you have to be, you can't you can't be a person that people have to babysit. You have to be like, self-aware, and you have to be able to self-contain. And when you sit down, you got to put your jacket on because you sweat and you get cold. And you got to know, like, you can't drop your thermos and have it roll all the way down the mountain because you didn't lock it in with a carabiner. And you
Mistakes.
can't be dropping your gloves, right? It's just like careless things like that, which ultimately led to part of his demise, which happened on Mount Everest in 2019. We had tent mated in 2019 in January, Antarctica. In April, he flew off to Nepal, and the goal was to climb Mount Everest. And by the time he got to the top in late May, raised his hand, fell over, and I stepped over him on my way up to the summit.
Okay, so that's a real harsh reality, and you're also thinking about your own mortality and stuff. And I know you had some experiences on Everest that were pretty gnarly. So
Mhm.
you got that. Is one is you got to kind of you see your friend who has passed, but you can't let that pull you because you're focusing on pure survival at that point, and you're above the death zone. So that's like
Yeah,
a lot of stuff.
yeah, and I've talked about this before, but like when you and I you're sitting in New York in the comforts of your house, and I'm sitting here in Sun Valley, Idaho, in my little office, and we're having this conversation. It's pretty brutal to think about that whole concept that you're stepping over dead bodies. I had another dead body laying next to me to my tent at 26,500 feet, 6 feet from my tent. And the reason why that is because kind of back to what you just talked about. And the only way I can try to explain it is think about if you're running a marathon and you're in that 26, mile, and you've just seen some people that are wobbly and just fried. And I'm not talking about the Kenyans who win it every year in like 2 hours, right? But I'm talking a guy that has been out there for 8 hours. And you're so depleted and you're so wasted and you're so out of your element. You're almost at 30,000 feet. Okay. I've
Hmm.
been there now at Everest, and this is a big surpriser for a lot of people. They go, "Oh, so how long did that take you? Like a weekend, or what'd you do?" No, you're living at 17,500 feet for 2 months. Remember, 1998, I climbed Mount Rainier. The top of that baby is 14,500. I was still another 3,000 feet higher living there for 2 months. And
Wow.
you're just getting to play. I lost 35 pounds and I'm snowblind. I'm running out of oxygen and all these other things. And so, yeah, you can kind of see him there. He's all in his, his down one piece bodysuit like I was wearing. And so you're not seeing his face or anything, but you're just recognizing that there he is. And like you said it perfectly. There's such an emphasis on self-preservation that if you don't like pay attention, because you've only got about 2 feet width, and if you trip and you fall and you're not locked in, 8,000 feet down to Tibet, 8,000 feet down to Nepal, either way. And this just happened, not there, but at Camp 3 a month ago when this 20-year-old, he was a Sherpa, he should have known better. And you're at Camp 3, you're on about a 35, this is at 23,500 feet, and you're on a 35-degree slope. And getting up to that, you got to climb this ice wall that's probably 1,500 feet. I mean, it's straight up, it's brutal and it's exposed, and he hadn't clipped into a fixed line, which are ropes that are running through that camp that have a stake on one side and a stake on the other. And so that you can take your carabiner and you can clip in, looks like this right here.
Wow, okay.
Yep, it looks just like that. And you can clip that sucker in. And so you know that's your security blanket that if you do trip, anyways, this kid didn't clip in, he tripped and he fell all the way to his death.
Uh, little margin for error on that mountain.
Well, there's no margin for error, and that's what happens when you're so tired. That's what happens. You just get careless and you take shortcuts, and a lot of times you don't even think about these things, and
Mhm.
that's why a lot of people die up there.
So tell me, I had seen a video of you. You were sitting there. You had summited. I think you were snowblind at that point. I think, and you could tell the viewers a little bit about what that even means, to be snowblind. But and I think you were talking, and I think you were exhausted, but you were, I guess you wanted to document. Tell us about that moment.
Well, there was a bunch of moments about around that, but when you're snowblind, first of all, it's for my case, is that when I'd climbed out of my tent at midnight at Camp 4 at 26,500 feet in preparation to go climb to the top, there was a 45 mile per hour wind blowing left to right, and there's little ice particles flying. If you can imagine, you're at 26,000. I mean, it's insane, and you're officially in the death zone. And my left eye just got clipped. My whole left side of my face got ripped off. And snowblind is like taking a piece of paper and putting it up to your left eye so you can kind of see light shades, but you can't see. Um, and you know, not only are you dealing with the hunger of not eating, but now you're snowblind, and now you're trying to go up the steepest south slope that you could possibly imagine, trying to get to the top. And it was just a battle for me. It was just 10 more feet, 10 more feet, get over here, get over there, 10 more feet.
Yeah. Yeah. So is it now when that happened and you were experiencing that blindness, did you know that the vision does come back in those situations? Is there a certain situations where it doesn't?
No, it usually comes back in 24 hours. But,
Okay.
at that time, all I knew is what I knew at that time, which is I'm snowblind. I got to deal with this. I wasn't worried like I was blind for the rest of my life. I just knew it was just yet another thing that you can't anticipate
Mhm.
that has now gone wrong. And now you got to deal with it. Right.
Okay. So and then you talk about the death zone, which is above what, 25 or 26?
Mhm.
So now and tell people what it's like to be you were on oxygen, I assume, and you're having to keep track of all that. And that's got to be an interesting thing too, is you're like, that's your lifeline. You got to look at that and know that you're gonna be able to have enough of that to sustain yourself for the ascent and descent.
Yeah, well, actually, the opposite of that happened. I ran out of oxygen at 27,500 feet, which is just under the balcony. So I still had 1,000 feet to go. My Sherpa had taken off. And so he was 300 yards below me with my one extra tank. And so that was a battle, number one, just to get back to him. I was sliding down my butt and I didn't know if I was going to make it and all that kind of stuff. So that's where definitely your mortality comes front and center, and you get really clear about life, what's
Okay.
going to happen when you're in those moments. I got back down to Camp 4, and the idea was you could jump into the tent and then and then sleep that night and then wake up the next day. Remember, I was supposed to go up Lhotse and go back down, but I'm not doing that. I can't do that. I'll die. So about 9 o'clock that night, I ran out of O's once again. And our head Sherpa came in and said, "Hey, is everything going okay?" And I said, "I ran out of O's." He goes, "We can't have any because we ran out," which he didn't. And I'd already bought O's for the next night for Lhotse. And he just said, "Can't get them." So, anyways, the long and short of it is I spent the entire night from 9 o'clock to the next morning, about 6 a.m., 5, 6 a.m. with no O's. And the fact that I'm even sitting here today talking to you is miraculous. I can't explain. I mean, the guy next to me, remember, there's a dead guy 6 feet from me. So,
So let's go right to that. That's that edge. So you're sitting there, you're probably exhausted, you're probably have all these things running through your mind, it's probably racing. So what are you pulling from at that moment? Is it your daughters? Is it what is it that's keeping you sane in that moment where you could be like off the edge?
yeah, a lot of it was that, you are so depleted and wasted. And remember, I had lost, the thing that we haven't talked about is when I'd climbed up to Camp 3, we got stuck in a cyclone for 3 days. And so you're just there at a 35 degrees and you can't go anywhere except just stay in your tent. And what you're eating is freeze-dried food because that's the only thing you're essentially it's taking sawdust, flavored sawdust, and pouring hot water on it and trying to eat that. In my system, over time, this is on many others. So I had a lot of experience with this. It just kind of like comes back up. I can't. So I had no calories. So I'm running on fumes. I've lost 35 pounds for a guy that doesn't have 35 pounds to lose. And now I'm stuck in this tent. And now I make my way up to Camp 4. And now I've gone through all this ordeal. And now I got to go through this. And now I'm like, it's just like everything was going against me, to make this. And so so to your question, my daughters, Claudette and Amelia, my wife, my family, my friends, in particular, Amelia, though, for the fight that she'd gone through and she continues to go through with epilepsy. She's now in the last 4 years, she's been cured of that. She lives in New York and with medication, but she doesn't have any more seizures, which is great. But it's just that fight and that grit and determination, that courage that she has, right? And you have to dig in for something because otherwise it's just too easy to give up. And just my mind also went to what went down in Into Thin Air in 1996, John Krakauer's book, and it's just that all these guys were in this weather disaster. The jet stream would come back down on top of them, and it was blowing like hell on us up there, and we were back in another storm, and you just got to figure out a way to like focus on it's a moment in time and you just got to get to the next minute to the next minute to the next minute and really occupy your mind constantly with positive thoughts and how you're going to get through this and get down to the next camp.
Great. So I'm going to make a couple really important distinctions here for the viewers. So a high level athlete can a lot of times compartmentalize and put things somewhere else. And that can be an advantage in sports, but a disadvantage in life.
Mhm.
So let me ask you, this intense person that knows how to do that and flip the switch, how did you learn how to feel again? In other words, was there a part of you because of these intense experiences where you were no longer present?
Yeah.
Was there a part of you that learned how to tap back into feelings, or did you always have the ability to go back and forth?
That's a great question. I don't know the exact answer to it, but I'll tell you this, is that for probably the year after I got back, so I was up and I climbed Mount Everest in 2021, May 23rd. And for the year after that, including me being up on different stages, whenever we'd get into this part of the conversation or the presentation of talking about Everest and my survival, and I would just break down and start like these tears come rushing out of my face, right? And I mean, I know that I know who I am, and so I'm not, but it was a little embarrassing, but I just couldn't help it. Like it just like because I came so close, like it's almost I didn't, this did not happen to me, but it's almost like listening or experiencing somebody who's been on a head-on car crash or, something else awful.
Yeah.
And there's this experience that they talk about of they floated outside their body and they're looking at everybody else, and
Yep.
himself on the table, and then they
Mhm.
they decide to come back down and jump in the body, and I wake up and hey,
Mhm.
right? It's just that it was almost like that for me. And so my mortality, playing in the NFL is like the ultimate gridiron gladiator type sport. And then you go to that to extreme mountaineering and some of these other things I've done. I've jumped out of planes, I've bungee, all this stuff. But this is the first time that, like, I don't know if I'm going to make it back from this. And so I just kept triggering that of helping me bring, and I think that on the other side of it too, like what kind of helped transform me in a lot of ways from when I used to play football is that I had two girls, right? And the way I was in football would no longer serve me in terms of being a great dad and really being there for my daughters.
So let's go to the next step where you mentioned the word providence in your book.
Mhm.
So are we kind of already teetering there? In other words,
Yeah,
I guess providence means the organization of a higher power in a sense.
yeah, yeah.
So what made you include that, and what does providence mean to you?
Well, again, I haven't talked a whole lot about this, but when I came off the top, I mean, this is weird to say, that's wild to say that on May 23rd, 2021, I was the last person sitting on top of Mount Rainier, right? My Sherpa takes off. I'm looking around like, how am the hell am I going to get off this mountain? Slowly get up, off I go, going down. By the time I got to, and I mentioned this before, by the time went from 30,000 feet down to 27,500 feet, and I'm sitting at this thing that they call the balcony. It's kind of a flat, that's the only flat spot where they can store tanks and things like that, oxygen tanks. And so I'd sat just below this rock and I could see down on the camp down below 1,000 feet below, and I could see Lhotse straight across. And I'm just like, how am I going to get to this? And I was frustrated because I've now run out of oxygen, and I'm looking 300 yards below me is my Sherpa carrying my one and only tank, and they're supposed to be with you the whole time. And so I'm there, and all of a sudden, from nowhere, there's this climber. Remember, I was the last guy off the mountain coming down, didn't see anybody. And there's this Russian climber that comes up from behind me. And my regulator was right behind my right, but I had no energy to take off and actually look at it. I just sat there. And I was pointing at it, and he looked at it, and he kept going, Nushki, Nushki, which I interpret as none. And so I was pointing at like to stop my like point, stop in my short. I need. So he understood what I was talking about, but it was that moment of inspiration of somebody coming behind me that was like in some small win was encouraging me to stand up. Now, I look back on that moment today, and there is no Russian climber. So you could say I could have hallucinated that. You could say that was an angel, but that's what I choose to believe. There was an angel that gave me enough encouragement, plus stepping into the power of my daughters that I want to get back for them, to get my ass back up. I even sliding down on my butt, trying to get back down to him to get some oxygen to kind of reinflate my whole system to get back to Camp 4, 26,500 feet. But that's the reason why I included that part in there.
Wow. I get the chills when you said that. That was pretty intense.
Yeah.
So how do you carry spirit with you today? Like, in other words, obviously that was a moment and it's like from wherever.
Yeah.
Um, what are your thoughts on spirituality or higher power and things like that, if you're willing to go there?
Yeah. I think there for sure has been a higher power in my life. And you know, I believe that's what got me off that mountain for sure. Um, when you come that close to the edge, it also told me it's not my time. And I think all these since I've been around the world, I don't proclaim myself as this or that. I think there's really one unified God. That's what I feel. Like at the end of the day, the question is, what do we all stand for? What are each one of these things, even though there's wars and everything else over these, what's the one common denominator? And usually it revolves around, you know, love, happiness, joy, being good to everyone around you, try to do the right thing, have a right North Star, be the right kind of dad, um, uh, to your kids, be responsible, don't steal, don't shoot, don't kill. Like there's all these like core, commandments, right? And it's just at the end of the day, that's what feeds you up to ultimately be the best possible version of yourself that you can be, led by this being that's out there. I mean, you can't say that all the Buddhists are wrong and all the Catholics are right, right? Just because you grew up in Nepal. It's like some of the I've been in the happiest people. I've been in these villages in the Serengeti in Africa, in Nepal, like they're top dollar, $6,000 a year. And these are some of the happiest, most kind people on the planet. And they have a different religion. Does that make them wrong? No, it doesn't. So that's what I believe. And, I try to really carry that spirit forward.
Wow. Okay. So you have all these combination of experiences, and we haven't even got into to the Sports Illustrated experience, and I'm also wondering what that's like in terms of shifting gears. And um, how did you know what to do there and what you wanted to accomplish, and how were you able to rally the troops around you?
I think, I mean, this gets back to just, business 101. If you do the same thing and the same thing produces the same results, you can pretty much bet that maybe, and that's not working, then you shouldn't be surprised about the end result, right? And that had been happening for years and years and years at Sports Illustrated. It was bought and sold 3 times in 5 years. And so when I got my hands on it, it's just really a whole notion about well, if you've been doing the same thing and it keeps going in the same cycle, right? It's just kind of like the person that's married to the bad husband or wife that they're going out and getting drunk and coming at 2 a.m. and smashing one. Like there's got to be something wrong in there, right? So maybe you should try. So I just decided like, let's do everything opposite. And some of it was also just common sense in that, long form journalism, like on our phone, we all have these notifications, right? And so what had happened over the years is that we're used to consume content now really in bite-sized pieces. Notification, like what's the top headline? That's the most juicy thing. And and so rather than write these super long, beautiful articles on the history of the NBA or something, I said, let's localize it, one. So let's have a reporter in every single stadium in college, in baseball, in the NFL, and in the NBA, and then hockey and some other places. And other people have done that, so that's not revolutionary. But let's do the content in a different way, which is more bite-sized pieces and hits, and do it multiple times a day. So we're doing about 30,000 pieces of articles per month, and then add a 1 to 3 minute video. And so that kind of seemed to be the magic formula. And you put that on a hot domain, and literally we doubled. And we went from zero, because I started this network, the site networks, went from zero to 1 billion page views in 2024 collectively. And that's basically impossible to do. And we did it. And so again, what I did worked. And there was some friction about 6 months ago, which essentially the new media company um, was really pushing to kind of go back to the old ways. And that wasn't something that I wanted to do because I've been there, I've done that, all that kind of stuff. I've seen what that produced. And so it just seemed like it was the best time for me to leave and go and start something new. I accomplished, like, that was a Mount Everest goal for me, to actually have been in Sports Illustrated 5 times when I was a player and actually be running a major part of Sports Illustrated. Was a big bucket list item. So, I'm out there and I will reemerge here sooner than later with my next big thing. And so the thing that's really cool about it is that because I kind of walk the walk and I want to talk the talk in terms of that pyramid. And just like I was when I had all this talent coming out of high school, and then I found myself like at the bottom of the depth chart in the pyramid in college. I had to work my way back up, and how was I going to get to be, Hall of Fame and all that stuff? And you just never know. I don't do things for the trophy, but if I go back and if I start where I'm starting again on my next career move, like if I follow these steps, I know that something amazing is going to happen down the road.
Okay. So, so you've accumulated all these experiences, all this knowledge, and have connected with a lot of wisdom. So now I'm going to put it into a place where, in terms of giving back, if there was a 15-year-old in front of you that was suicidal, depressed, anxious, what would you say and how would you connect with that person to give them the hope?
Hmm. Well, I think the one thing and the first thing is that it's never over till it's over. That's one.
Okay.
Number two is let's talk about the Sports Illustrated experience, which is if you do the same thing, then the same thing will most likely happen. And so you got to change it up. And so many people are fearful from making that right-hand turn and doing something completely new, completely different. And sometimes that's the best thing you can possibly do. I think friction can be a good thing, not a bad thing. And really leaning in to something that's hard. And let me tell you something about hard. Hard is hard. Hard is not easy.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that people fall in
Yeah.
these different circumstances,
Mhm.
and the one thing, and this is the biggest thing, is that there's one thing that we can all learn from, or actually not learn from, but we possess. Like I can't make somebody, if somebody they're depressed because they couldn't play in the NBA or can't play a professional sport, or they're not an actor, or they're not this or that. There's one thing that you can't control, and that's your attitude. And that's you can bring that with positivity every single day. And the other thing too is that, and I said this earlier, action creates reaction. Like a lot of times when this depression and everything else, it really seeps in, is because things aren't going, and either you're doing the same thing and you're working at McDonald's or whatever your circumstance is, and you're not trying to like, are you going about your this new life that you want with a relentless intensity of waking up? You're not sleeping in until 11. You're not playing video games till 3 o'clock in the morning. Like a lot of these things have some repetitive behaviors that go on. And bad things happen to everybody. Like I said, I've gone through my stuff. And I've had that book that you talked about in the very beginning, that the faith and the resilience to rise above life's challenges. Like that's me, right? And I just choose to have an attitude of positivity. The glass is half full. I'm going through my little thing right now. It's not, I wouldn't call it huge adversity, but I'm looking for my next gig and I don't know what that is. So there's uncertainty around that. So what am I trying to do? I'm chipping away every single day. And the last thing I'll leave you is this, is that this is what my coach told me a long time ago. And it's so simple yet so profound, which is it takes a little more to make a champion. It takes a little more to make a champion. And if you want to have that championship mindset, if you want to build up that elite, you know, uh, confidence, if you want to find yourself in new circumstances, if you gotta, it takes a little more to make a champion. You gotta make the extra call. You gotta get up a little earlier. You gotta go to bed. You gotta eat the right things. You got right just to set yourself up for success. And success sometimes won't happen for 10 years. It might happen in 5 years. It doesn't like when the competitive greatness is really loving the process of trying to get to the top of the pyramid. And it took me 3 dark years before I ever saw the light of day. There was no guarantee of my success
Right.
that I was going to be able to do that. And what I'm in right now, it may take me 3 years to get where I want to go, or 2 years, or 1 year, or 6 months. I don't know, but I know that if I chip and I work harder than anybody else, and I keep working the process, the system, that I will put myself in the right position at the right timing when the universe is ready to grant me, safe passage, and something great will happen.
So what is your next Everest?
What is my next Everest? Well, look at I'm taking on a lot of things right now. I've been out keynote speaking a lot. I just wrote this book, as you said, Finding Your Summits on Amazon. I just finished the Audible part of that, so now that's on audible.com. I just got back from this leadership conference, also leading a bunch of people on in the country of Montenegro and on the border of Albania, which is really cool. So I'm just leaning into more things like that. I'll have more summits. Last year I did the Dolomites. I just got back with this climb I talked about. I'll have another one coming up, this next year. So it's really focused around that, public speaking, and trying to find my new media company that gonna go, attack the world with again.
Is there anything else you want to say to the viewers at this point in terms of words of wisdom or pearls, or are we complete?
I think there's been a lot of great nuggets that have been in there. People have listened, the whole hour, and I appreciate you asking these really insightful questions. But usually with all these athletes that you see out there in the limelight, or in my case, I've been able to accomplish some flashy things. It's come from the hard work that I've put in, and nothing has come easy for me. I've had to chase everything, single thing down. I've yet to be called in like this opportunity. Usually I have to chase those things down. Um, and everybody's different, but I do know that I put in a level of of resilience and drive and grit and go get them that most don't. And that's really the only difference. And that doesn't make me special. That just makes all I'm is committed to my own process.
Mark, I really appreciate you. I appreciate your wisdom. I appreciate the example that you are. I appreciate your effort today. I think you brought yourself. You played full out. You brought uh, such beautiful things for people to lean into. And I think leaning in life to difficult things is really what makes life special. And I think you're an example of that. And thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay. All right, folks, this is Will Cook signing off from the Will to Win. See you next time.